in this figure that illustrates the words or concepts that people associate with alternative regionalism, there are certain words that echo in SSE. For example, solidarity, joint resistance, it's grassroots participatory, and all that. No? So if you look at these words, they are really swak na swak, as we say in Filipino, or really fit into the SSE concept and the idea of social movements about resisting and building at the same time. So I just want to show that this is not something that's particular to Southeast Asia. It is a global movement, but it emerged in Latin America, where people, especially workers, were thrown out in the streets by structural adjustment programs imposed by multilateral institutions. So they had to really take over, factories, other production centers, so they can continue to live in dignity and with and in the context of economic democracy. So the World Social Forum is a global equivalent of the ASEAN Social Forum. And there, uh, the first discussions on SSE were conducted and synthesized mainly experiences and visions of social movements. And to show that it is a diverse concept, it's a diverse movement, and that we can all learn from each other, like what we're doing in this forum now. But what is clear is that it is considered an alternative to mainstream economic models, particularly neoliberal globalization, which has wreaked havoc not only on ASEAN nations, but also other parts of the world, particularly in Latin America. So now we like to see ourselves as part of a huge movement that now commands 1 billion members in just one cooperative movement, 3 million co-ops all over the world with 280 million people employed by these co-ops. And there is now a revival in Africa and Latin America of co-ops. And then we have social enterprises. Uh, well, we have a lot in ASEAN. And then women in particular have really led the SSE movement, especially in South Asia. And you have self-help groups there that are in the millions. And fair trade, which we can talk about later, they have their equivalents in Cambodia, in Thailand, in Malaysia, Sri Lanka, etc. And the concept of fair trade is something that's really embedded in SSE discourse. And then at the global level, there's an intercontinental network. And we belong to the Asian wing of it, which is called Asian Solidarity Economic Council. And you heard Dr. Jayasurya talk in the plenary yesterday about what it's all about and connecting it to the ASEAN situation. But then there is also a movement to mainstream it in government structures. So there are a couple of countries in Europe and Latin America where there are ministries and national secretariats on SSE. And within the UN system, because those social movements have tried to influence ILO, for example, UNDP, UN Women, all the progressive um, institutions within the UN structure. So now there's a UN task force on SSE. Okay, so the UN task force defines it as the production of goods and services by a broad range of organizations and enterprises that have explicit social and often environmental objectives and are guided by principles of cooperation, solidarity, equity, and democratic self-management, echoing what we mean by alternative regionalism. Now, it's an attempt to reassert social control over the economy, no, has always been towards profit maximization. In ASEC, we identified five dimensions that we use to indicate whether something is SSE or not. No? So one is socially responsible governance, which is inclusive, participatory, accountable, transparent, etc. Edifying ethical values that depart from, you know, exploiting other people to gain, uh, you know, personal interest or advantage. Then this one, the socioeconomic benefits refer to social development. It refers to social protection and other advantages that accrue from being members of SSE organizations. And of course, there's the ecological conservation and economic sustainability. Because you cannot, move forward if in the first place you cannot, have a net surplus in your operations. So the triple bottom line is what we are known for, meaning first we are people centered, then we are, concerned primordially with the life of the planet, which is now in danger because we are in a climate emergency. And then prosperity for all. Then with the SDGs, we added peace and partnership because without SSE, without people having jobs and some kind of security, you will always have wars and conflicts. And partnership means that we are not alone, that we need to have others with us. So here, I think this is very important to understand what SSE is all about because it talks about, if you look at the bottom, you have many actors, but the key one is the one on the right, which are the self-managed, democratically run enterprises. And then they are linked to civil society, NGOs. Sometimes private business and charitable foundations help out. And government also has a role to play, but the self-managed enterprises are autonomous and not dictated upon by government, but they do get support, especially at the local level, with LGU supporting citizens at the grassroots level, trying to survive and to prosper. And then you have the biosphere on both ends, meaning that you cannot go beyond, the limits of this planet. You cannot go on polluting. You must be able to conserve, recycle, reuse, etc. So from the supply, you move into production and to the market, consumption. And in every step or process, people are there to decide and to plan and to discuss how we will divide the payments or the surplus and how this will again be reinvested. So it's not just one enterprise moving by its lonesome in a vacuum, but it's a whole chain. We call it a supply chain. And it is a chain that requires sharing responsibilities because the self-managed enterprises cannot go it alone. I was thrown a question by the host, what are the common struggles now of SSE? We've run a couple of, online sessions in ASEC on this. Even in HomeNet Southeast Asia, we've done this. And we saw that the real challenge now that we are under COVID, which has morphed also from a health into an economic crisis, we need to survive and recover. And people must be able to have their recover their income, their purchasing power, their markets. Otherwise, they will have nothing. They will not be able to access even the healthcare system if they have no resources, money to do it in places like the Philippines, where it is the healthcare system is terribly privatized. Even if we have a UHC, grassroots people cannot afford. There's so much out of pocket expenses. No? And then we need to adjust to the new normal and shifting to alternative livelihood now food is primordial because people are getting hungry. People are doing community gardens, agroecological farms that are linked to peasant movements for uh, food sovereignty and community supported organic agriculture. We have to emphasize organic because, you know, commercialized chemical agriculture destroys the environment. And now we're all used to cell phones and online facilities for selling, for organizing, lobbying, advocacy, and networking, because there is no other means by which we can really move our organizations forward in a, you know, situation of isolation, restriction of mobility, etc. And of course, the net surplus is affected by measures that now need to comply with health protocols, labor, and environmental standards. Okay, what is the potential for regional exchanges now? This assumes that there could be a post-pandemic recovery and resumption of both domestic and international trade and travel. No? Because right now things are almost at a standstill or barely moving forward. So our experience as HomeNet, you know, over the last 12, 13 years where we have been doing this together, the products that are easy to exchange include food, textiles. In ASEAN, we have silk from Cambodia and Vietnam and Laos, and we don't have silk in the Philippines. Indonesia has batik and all that. No? So these things can be exchanged and can be valued because they also have a cultural context and matrix. No? So we have crafts that are particular to our countries that we can be proud about and which we can, you know, collect as souvenirs of friends in other, you know, areas, etc. And what we found out, for example, in the ASEAN Forum last year in Bangkok, recycled products really have a market, like these juice bags that we make into huge market bags, you know, and many other mats and other important and useful products. Aside from, of course, the accessories, personal care. And then herbal medicines, because this is really a tradition, the indigenous, you know, oils and aromatherapy from our countries, you know, and also from the Asian peoples where I bought some seeds there, like purple okra, and they grew in the Philippines, you know. So and then everyone's now going into planting because, you know, under lockdown, you need to have some kind of activity and release. So these are the potential products that can be exchanged regionally. In terms of services, there are a lot of very good destinations that are run by social enterprises and co-ops. So ecotourism is one area where we can actually benefit from, and the communities can also have an advantage. You will have markets and you can showcase the culture of the community and their initiatives and their successes and their challenges, etc. So mechanisms we tried before, we had a fair trade fair in Cambodia because we have fair trade groups both in affiliates of HomeNet in Cambodia and also CraftLink in Vietnam, you know. Then bazaar, study tours, exposure dialogues, which we learned from SEWA in South Asia, and then online platforms, of course, because now we cannot move without an internet facility. So I will end there, and maybe others. I know there are some Filipinos that are already SSE practitioners. They can maybe share. And then, of course, the Indonesians are very, KPRI are very advanced. They have very good products focusing on food. Maybe we can now have an exchange. No? Thank you for listening.